Good morning and welcome to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell, your bright spot to your Saturday morning. I'm your host, Trillia, and I can't wait to get into today's show, our topic. It's just so exciting to me. And I have a question for you. Start thinking about this right now. How are your relationships going? How about your conversations? I have a guest that I can't wait to introduce, who's really going to be able to help us. As her book describes, conversation is getting harder. We're feeling more isolated, and loneliness is an epidemic. We know that to be true because the Surgeon General put out a study. I mean, it is pervasive and everywhere. And sometimes we wonder, how can I foster meaningful connections with others? Why doesn't anyone ever ask meaningful questions? If my personal happiness depends upon having warm relationships, like all research shows, how can I become a better conversationalist and create connection? Can you relate? I can relate to some of it, and maybe not all of it, but can you think of your conversations, and are you longing for loving, meaningful, and joyful conversations? Um, do you look for, okay, how why can I not connect with this person? What is missing? What is why is it that we aren't connecting on a deeper level? Or maybe why is there so much conflict? What's happening? Heather Holleman, she invites us to reimagine better conversations. Her work demonstrates how we can develop authentic community by changing our relational mindsets to become more curious, to believe the best about others. And let's be honest, sometimes we struggle with this, and to express concern about their lives and share our own, which can be so hard. All of it sounds easier than it is to do, doesn't it? So I can't wait for us to dig in with Heather Holleman. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Oh, I'm so excited for this program. This is going to be a great hour together, Trillia.
It is. So your bio is pretty impressive. You are an associate teaching professor at Penn State, speaker and author. You design advanced writing curricula for the English department, and you love helping students thrive professionally. You have written 8 books, which is impressive alone, including the one we'll discuss today, The 6 Conversations, Pathways to Connection in an Age of Isolation and Incivility. You also serve with Faculty Commons in the professor and graduate student ministry of Cru. Okay, so your bio is awesome, but one of the things that I love to give Living by Faith listeners a chance is to hear how you became Christian, how you came to know Jesus. Can you share your testimony?
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity for letting me talk about this. So when I was 12 years old, that's when I understood the gospel for the first time. I had parents who taught me about the Lord. I was going to a little church that helped me understand what it meant that I needed a savior because I was a sinner. And at that time, Trillia, I became really excited to read the Bible. I loved the book of Psalms, connecting in the Psalms. And that was really when I gave my life to Christ and I was baptized at that time. But my story is I really didn't understand how to grow in my faith. And I just kept making terrible, terrible decisions. And by the time I
Yeah.
got to college, I was crying on my dorm room floor at the University of Virginia because I had just read John 10:10, where
Mm.
Jesus says, "The thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but I have come that you may have life and have it abundantly."
Mm.
And
Eh,
that moment, I got on my knees and I really dedicated my life to the Lord. It was the fullest moment of surrender, and kind of the rest is history.
So that's interesting. Had you been reading your Bible? Because to hear that you were a college student reading your Bible is kind of unique, I think. And so is that something, a practice that you had been doing, but the Lord just illuminated those scriptures at that time?
Yes, and I think what was missing is honestly, I didn't understand how to live the Christian life and the power of the Holy Spirit. I didn't have really good discipleship, so I kind of was one of those Christians that wanted to walk with Jesus, but I didn't know how to make good decisions. So I was, drinking at fraternity parties, dating all kinds of, guys and trying to find happiness through, having a boyfriend or if only I could be thinner or if only I could achieve more, which is really what the genesis of the book Seated with Christ comes from all of those years in college. And so even though I was reading the Bible, I didn't understand surrender. I didn't understand how to tell Jesus, look, you own my life now. You direct
Mhm.
me by the Holy Spirit every day. I want to keep in step with the Spirit. I want to live out the truth of Galatians 5, which is really as you become conformed to Christ, you start to demonstrate that fruit of the Spirit, and your life is just increasingly filled with joy and peace. I didn't have any of that, even though
Mm.
I had prayed to receive Christ. I don't think I knew how to walk with him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I do
Yeah,
know what you
so
mean.
you do.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I mean,
just
I
needed to
just think
learn.
you needed to learn. And I think there's so many right now who probably are listening and thinking, wait, I need to learn. I need
Yes.
discipleship. I need
Yes.
Yeah, I
And
think go ahead. Go ahead.
no, and I think it was really about who was gonna be in charge of my life. I think it was really about who is gonna be the Lord. Is it me of my own life, or is it Jesus? Does Jesus get to be in charge? And so that's the difference for me.
Mm. So, did you and you may have mentioned this, but did you have people surrounding you to help you be discipled after that?
Well, that was the problem for me. This is why I'm such a huge advocate of campus ministry. I
Mhm.
regret those years at University of Virginia. Those, Campus Crusade girls knocked on my door. There were all kinds of ministries that I could have gotten involved in, but I just didn't make the time for it.
Yeah.
Academics was sort of my idol. But Trillia, this is how good God is. He did not stop pursuing me. And at the University
Mhm.
of Michigan, I was working on a PhD, and God just sent so many great people to mentor me, to help me grow. And Cru, it's now called Cru, is a great ministry to help you get established in your faith and learn how to share your faith. I also was involved in the summers at a Christian girls camp named Camp Greystone. And that's where I got to meet some of the godliest people I've ever met
Mm.
that really kind of set my life on the right path. So you really do need to find mentors and people who are years ahead of you who can just help you grow. So I love campus ministry. Now that I'm almost 50, I take that role really seriously to help younger people grow.
I love that. Okay, so full disclosure, I became a Christian at the age of 22, and it was the result of someone on a campus ministry. I was at the University of Tennessee, and
I love
she,
this.
yeah. And now, interestingly, I had met her before because I was doing a camp, a cheer camp, and I was the leader, and she was my assistant, and we were doing and so I had met her and she shared the gospel with me, but I resisted it. But then she kept inviting me, and then I got to serve on a college ministry. So, and I'm about to launch two kids into college, and so this is
Yes.
something that is incredibly important to me right now. So, listeners, I think the moral of the story is one. I think sometimes people can be afraid of college campus. I'm going to use the word secular. I don't know what other way to say it. College campuses that maybe are. I just think there are so many campus ministries and movements that the Lord is doing on college campuses all around the country. So we can have a lot of faith that God is on the move. And two,
Yes.
that he doesn't abandon his children, right? So
Right.
that's something to be really encouraged by. And that's building my faith even as I launch my own kids. But two, we really do need to find that community. We can't do this on our own. We
No.
can't, yeah. And how would you, I know this isn't a part of our conversation, but as you and I, we were talking, listeners, before the show that we're going to be like, it's like you and I sitting down for coffee. So here we
Yeah.
are. How would you encourage you work on college campus? How would you
Yes.
encourage the parent who's launching their kid out to to not only entrust their kid to the Lord, but also practically, what can we
Okay.
do to help? Yeah.
Two things you're going to need as a parent. Number one, you encourage your child to go to the activity fair and get their name on every single
Activity fair. Thank
email
you.
list or text group. So I said, Kate, I know this is going to be hard for you. Get your name on every single campus ministry email sign up and just go that first week. You're going to have free pizza, free ice cream, free swag, free whatever. Just go. The campus ministries are there. The second thing, Trillia, and I know this is great timing with this interview, I gave my children all the practical skills to how to connect in warm conversations. So Kate was equipped in that freshman dorm to be able to knock on doors, introduce herself, begin to have great conversations to connect with people on our hallway. She has more friends than she knows what to do with because they read the 6 Conversations book. I'm not even kidding you.
That's
the thing we're going to talk
amazing.
about today. Because then when they're able to have conversations, they're not nervous when they walk in the doors of Navigators or Campus Crusade or whatever ministry they're popping in on. They can introduce themselves. They can learn how to ask really good conversation questions and not feel awkward. And the same thing's going to happen. They're going to thrive in their classes. They're going to thrive everywhere. And then I do think, you know, it's not what you think when you say, oh, join a Bible study. These things are awesome. They are so fun. Kate is having the best time just joining a campus Bible study, on campus. It gives you something to do. You're never going to be lonely if you just sign up for those things. So activity fair and encourage your children how to make warm connections with people on campus through great conversation.
I love that. And I just have about 1,000 more questions because I need you to mentor me.
Let's do it. Let's do it, Trillia.
As I'm launching these kids. But that is something that I think it's amazing how your testimony has lent itself to, you're seeing the fruit of what you experience, like that.
Yes.
Yes. And now you get to share with others.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Even if you have a child that's more introverted and like really nervous to be on campus, it just takes 1 or 2 friends. And I just said, invite, just go down the hall and say, hey, I'm going to the dining hall. Who wants to come to dinner? Guess what? Those are going to be your friends. Or, hey, I got to walk across campus to my English class. Is anyone going that way? Just be a gatherer. And if you're introverted, just having 1 or 2 people that are walking to class with you, you're going to have a great experience if you're a college student and you're listening and you're getting ready to go to campus in the fall. This is not as hard as you're thinking, and you're going to have great community.
That's so encouraging to my mom heart.
Yes.
So thank you. Just in case you didn't know, this is for me today. We are talking with Heather Holleman. She is the author of The 6 Conversations, Pathways to Connection in an Age of Isolation and Incivility. More with Heather and Living by Faith when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I am talking with Heather Holleman, and we are talking about conversations, and it's hard to talk sometimes, and so breaking those barriers, and we're in a culture right now where everything's a little bit intense. It's hard to have conversations, and so Heather, you have written this book that helps us have better conversation. Why do you think it's important to, we know why, but help us. Why do you think it's important to dig into this and have better conversations?
Well, having better conversations is your key to forming warm connections with people. And I became so concerned with the impacts of loneliness just on health and what was happening in the culture. Did you know that if you're lonely, it's the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and you're increasing your chance of premature death by 29%. If you read the Surgeon General's report, it's like astonishing about how bad loneliness is. And the other thing is the Harvard Grant study, the longest research study ever conducted, says, indisputably, the number one determining factor of a happy life is whether or not you have warm connections. And so many of my students, so many of my friends, Trillia, are like, I just don't know how to have good conversations with people. It's like we're texting all the time or we're sharing, TikToks or reels, but we're not like asking good questions. And my students will say, yeah, I went on a date. The guy did not ask me one question about my life. Or,
Mm.
a guy will say, I've been in my fraternity 4 years. The brothers don't know anything about me. So this is like a real problem. And I care deeply about helping people develop this just as a professional skill so they learn how to even connect in the workplace. It's great for marriages. A lot of people are lonely in their marriages because they don't know how to talk to their spouse.
Hmm. What? Okay, so is this a recent development, or do you feel like, or have you seen through your research that this has been something that has been a problem from a longer problem? Because my brain thinks, oh, social media, of course, TikTok,
Yes.
everything's so quick, but what has your research shown?
Well, the Cigna Health study that came out, I think in 2018, was the first time we were really surveying people. That's of 20,000 US adults, saying that over half the population is feeling alone and not having any meaningful conversations. And I believe that people trace that to our online lives, texting, and kind of not having the need for conversation the same way we used to before the phones. I would say that's definitely one of the reasons why people are feeling that way. The other reason is the rise of incivility and kind of cancel culture. People are afraid to
Mm,
talk to one another because it's sort of this idea of suspicion and prejudgment. So, one of the
yeah.
mindsets you need in order to connect with people is something called believing the best about them, having unconditional positive regard. And that became really difficult in 2020 on. People just became very suspicious of each other, nervous about what people believed about things like vaccines or who they were voting for or different social issues. So that has contributed. The rise of incivility has contributed, but I don't think it was that way. When I was coming up, I never remember thinking, oh, I don't have anyone to talk to. Maybe occasionally I would feel a sense of loneliness, but it wasn't like it is now. There's a sense of chronic loneliness in the culture that I don't think existed, before 2000, say. What do you agree? Do you think that like you remember not kind of having that chronic loneliness that we're seeing now?
Yes, I don't remember. Okay, I don't know. I should say if I have struggled with loneliness at all. So I'm
Yeah.
sure I
Yeah.
have.
So you're just
Um,
trying to figure it out. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know if loneliness would be my temptation or my general struggle. I would
Right.
say, yeah. So I would now believing the best. That is a struggle, and
Right.
and so yes. But
Yeah. So
so go ahead.
no, I that's such a good research question to survey levels of loneliness in different generations, different decades. What I look
Yeah.
at is mostly kind of the phenomenon of the last, 5 to 10 years and what we're seeing, and the rise of just the mental health issues, anxiety, depression. People are and they're looking at what's the best protective factor against these kind of mental health issues. And people are saying social belonging, warm
Yeah.
connections with people. And so we didn't have the same social belonging that we had, say, in the 1990s, 2000s. I think it's different now.
Yes, no, 100%. And I also wonder if someone who is a little bit like me sat down and evaluated. I think part of I'm so busy. I don't even know if I have time. So that is probably a part of the problem is that when you sit down and you think, okay, how are my relationships?
Right.
Sit down and just sit in it. Okay, wait, when was the last time that this person and I had a really deep conversation? But I will say I'm pretty intentional, and I wonder if that's part of it. I am always being discipled or have a disciple person. I'm intentional in my relationships with my husband and my children, and so I try to make sure that my our conversations and our connection is goes as deep rooted as we can go, right?
That's
But
wonderful.
yeah, but I do think that when I look at the culture in general and I think about trying to connect with, and I imagine so many of people experience this with people outside of my walls, or outside of my church, it can be harder to go deeper. And I wonder if part of it is that we're busy people just running, going. And there's a sense of vulnerability that is difficult. And I think one of the things that you hit on might be part of the reason is we're in a culture right now where you say one thing and it's explosive. And
Right.
so there can be a fear of saying the wrong thing. So we walk on eggshells with one another. There can also be a difficulty going in deep, and it could be my context, my Southern context. I don't know if that,
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe that plays a part in what not sharing what is really going on.
I
And
think
so,
that's right.
yeah, yeah. So I think context matters, and I also think that how we've grown up, and I grew up in a family where we're all very open, and my husband, however, grew up in a family where they were not, and it was quieter. And so, have you seen that kind of dynamic in even how you were raised?
Oh, yes. Ashley and I, my husband Ash, he is sort of the brains behind this book and really thought through as an introvert what do you need to do to help people? But he's from the South, and we do these workshops all over the nation. And what we have found is, depending on where you grew up, you're going to have a particular barrier. So, for example, if you grew up in the South, you were probably taught that it was rude to ask personal questions and that you don't want to be nosy. And Ash always
Yeah.
jokes that, gossip is fine. You can talk about your neighbor. Just so that was a joke. When I was when we gave this presentation, like say for example, we're in New York City, the women, their barrier is definitely time and the mindset. So the four mindsets are, be curious, believe the best, express concern, share your life. In the
S-
South,
I-
curiosity is the barrier. In the
yeah.
Northeast, it's time. So they don't have time to express concern about people, and they're nervous about, well, I don't want to take on people's problems. I got to get on the subway. I got to get to the Upper East Side. I don't have enough time. Sometimes in New England, for example, the barrier might be actually sharing your life. It's too vulnerable. It's odd. They're not used to opening up. Is your husband from New England by chance? Where's he
His
from?
No, his mother is from England.
Oh, from
And so,
actual England. Yes.
like, yes, which is a different culture all in of itself.
Yes.
His dad is,
Yes.
yeah, from the South, but yeah, so I think he is introverted and quiet, and so
Yes.
yes.
So what we do when we're helping people get over these barriers is I show them the research from the Yale Relationship Lab, and this is about the power of asking questions even if they're perceived as sensitive or maybe too private. People end up liking you more that you ask the question. They actually feel closer to you. So we encourage people, even if you're nervous about this and you're not used to doing this, asking good questions is a profound act of love. It makes people feel loved and seen, and you kind of got to get over that barrier of being curious, because the research is so great. You can also look at George Mason. Their curiosity research is all about how good it is for you when you're curious about other people. You have better relationships, your marriages are stronger, you're more creative, you have better mental health outcomes. So even just teaching people, the 6 conversations make it easy. We give you 6 ways to be curious about other people. But you're right, in the South, there is a barrier there. They're like, oh, I was not raised this way. But they find that when they start using the 6 conversations, they find that their relationships really start to flourish because they're asking really good questions and getting into these meaningful, warm connections with people.
Well, we have 2 minutes before the break, which is so sad because it only means we have less time coming up.
Yes.
But here's my question: because you mentioned the 4 mindsets, can you run through them again? Because we
Yes.
hadn't mentioned them previously. Tell us, what are they again?
Okay, you need the 4 mindsets to have a warm connection before you even ask the first question. Curiosity, believing the best, expressing concern, and that just means knowing what's going on with people. What are their stressors? What thought is keeping them up at night? Do they have any upcoming decisions? Easy. You don't need to be a therapist, but express concern and share your life. So if you're curious, believe the best, express concern, and share your life, you have the 4 mindsets in any conversation that will help you have that warm connection as you're asking good questions.
Okay, very, very helpful. So we need to be curious. Do we have to do all of these at the same time?
Well, that's what the research shows. You have to be someone that basically is changing your entire mindset as you look at the person in front of you. You are literally thinking, this person is an infinite marvel. I'm going to discover things about them. I'm going to learn something from them and believe the best that they have something to teach me. I'm going to figure out what's going on with them so I can express concern. And then when it's my turn, I'm going to share my life about things that I'm concerned about or things I'm celebrating. So you learn to operate out of those 4 mindsets. And guess what? They're all in Philippians 2. They're all in Romans 12, Galatians 6. This is discipleship, Trillia. This is how Paul instructs us to live. It's countercultural. It's the way to thrive as a human.
Well, I want to get into the theology of it all
Yes.
when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Nouvelle. We have been talking with Heather Holleman about 6 conversations, and we've been thinking through how we can engage better, talk better, ask better questions. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have a question for Heather that you'd like to share, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Call us at 877-548-3675 or 877-LIVE-675. That's 877-548-3675 or 877-LIVE-675. So Heather, before the break, we were talking about and getting into the scriptures. You said something to the effect of, all of this comes from Philippians and believing the best. Absolutely. And these kinds of, how do we engage and talk? You were saying it's a part of loving one another. And so tell us how you have connected these ideas with the scriptures.
Well, that was the best part about writing the 6 conversations. I was surveying all the available social science literature on how to have a warm connection. And Trillia, as I'm reading, I was like, wait, where have I heard this before?
Yeah.
It was as if the social science research finally caught up to what the Bible has told us all along. And for me, Philippians 2 became the most deeply convicting passage of scripture because all of the 4 mindsets are in that passage. It's about honoring people. Paul says, value others above yourself. Look to the interest of other people. That's like being curious. Valuing other people is believing the best. And then you're kind of sharing your life the way Jesus did and expressing concern about what's going on. Romans 12 changed my life because it's about blessing those who persecute you. Think about believing the best about people, rejoicing with those who rejoice. Well, how can you rejoice with someone if you never ask the question, what are you celebrating? What's going well for you? How do you mourn with people if you don't go across the street with your neighbor and say, hey, what's hard for your family this month? Are there ways I can pray for you? And I just love how Romans 12 really teaches us a new way to live and associating with all kinds of people. It says, don't be proud, but be willing to associate, with everyone. So those 2 passages, I could find the 4 mindsets in each of them. And it really became what I tell my students is this is like ancient wisdom. This is ancient wisdom that's telling us how to live a beautiful life.
Absolutely. I was thinking about Philippians 2, and I thought I'd read a part of it because I think it kind of hits to the problem we might have with doing
Yes.
all of the things that we've said. So Philippians 2, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others, and other versions say count others more significant than yourselves.
Mm.
Not looking to your own interests, but to the interest of others. And that, I think, it might be part of our problem. And I want to dig into the problem of it all because as you were talking and as we've been thinking and talking about sharing with others and asking questions and being interested and curious and all of these things, it takes a lot of humility. We are somewhat selfish, wouldn't you say?
I think so. I mean, a lot of times people, when they think about how can I develop in these ways, what it actually comes down to is kind of selfishness. The idea like, I'm not going to be curious about other people. I don't have time. I don't want to believe the best about them. I'm better than everyone. I believe I know the right answer. No one can teach me anything. Or think about expressing concern. I'm not going to care about them, or I'm not going to share my life with other people. It's rooted in pride, I think. And
Mm.
if the goal is for us to be conformed to the image of Christ, when I read Philippians 2 and Romans 12, I thought, okay, Lord, make me into the type of person that warmly connects with people the way you did. Help me ask great questions like you did. Help me to know
Mm.
what's going on with people like you did, and help me share my life. I mean, in Thessalonians, Paul talks about we were delighted not only to share the gospel, but our lives as well. And
Mm.
a young reader yesterday was reading the book of Acts. And when all everyone's gathering together in the early church, you actually can find evidence of all six categories of human connection, the togetherness they had, the way they were social, physical, cognitive, emotional, volitional, like all the things we talk about what it means to be human are in that book of Acts in the early church. And the book teaches once you're loving people, ask questions in every category of what it means to be human. Get to know them, ask about their friends, about their bodies, about things they're thinking, about decisions they're making, their spiritual lives. This is going to be a whole new way for us to live, Trillia.
Mm. Okay, so if you have a question for Heather, because I know you do, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Call us at 877-548-3675 or 877 Live 675. Okay, so we had talked about four mindsets, but I don't actually think we've talked about the actual six conversations.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
what are those six conversations? What are we talking about?
Well, this is such a delight, and you're going to think a kindergartner can learn this. In fact, there are middle schoolers reading the six conversations, and it's helping them tremendously. So every time you look at someone, think of the six ways that they're made as humans, and think about questions you can ask in any of the six pathways. So when you see someone, you don't have to just say, "How are you?" which most people ask, and it's, kind of a bad verb, so you're not going to get a good answer. I can tell you about that later, but think about it. You see someone, you can ask a social question. Hey, who have you been hanging out with lately? I want to hear about your new friends. You can ask an emotional question. Hey, what surprised you about your holiday, or what's challenged you about your semester? You can ask a physical question. Okay, how have you been sleeping? I ask my students this, Trillia. Hey, how have you guys been sleeping? I learned more about lavender, melatonin, ASMR, all this stuff they're doing. You can ask,
ASMR is
yeah,
amazing. That's hilarious.
yes. You can ask a cognitive question. I'm a professor, so my favorite category of conversation is cognitive. That's why Gary Chapman wrote the foreword to this book, because these are really love
Mm.
language pathways. So when people say, Heather, what have you been thinking about? What have you been learning? That's the cognitive category. And I feel really loved when people ask me that. You can ask
Mm.
a volitional question. That's the fancy word for human decision making. So if I were trying to get to know you, Trillia, I would say, hey, how did you decide to start this radio program? That would enter up a huge, it's the verb decide. Hey, how'd you decide to go into cheerleading? I want to hear that story, because you mentioned that you were like a lead cheerleader. Now I want to talk all about that. You can ask a spiritual question. Like on Monday morning, sometimes I'll say, hey, do you guys do anything? Do you have any spiritual traditions that are important to you? And you will end up learning so much about people if you just ask about, hey, do you have any spiritual? So it's so easy that my husband, who's an introvert, who often will say, I don't think well on my feet, when he meets someone, in his mind, he's thinking, okay, I have six categories of questions to start asking someone. And then what's so beautiful about the six conversations is you have endless combinations of questions after that. So if it's a big football time right now, everyone's watching, playoff games or whatever tomorrow. And you can ask someone, hey, did you decide to watch, the Eagles play, or did you go to the game or whatever? And if they say yes, most people get stuck in conversation, but you can actually ask six choices. So if I said, hey, did you go to the game? And my neighbor says yes, I can say a social question. Hey, who'd you go with? Did you take your wife? I could ask an emotional question. Do you get really excited? Like, how are your emotions about this? You can ask a physical question. Hey, I know you had knee surgery. How does your body handle sitting in the stands that long? You can ask a cognitive question. Hey, what have you been thinking about the coach? You can ask a volitional question. How did you decide to get season tickets? You can ask a spiritual question. Hey, tell me more about your spiritual rituals related to sports. Do you pray for the team? I mean, Trillia, it is so easy. And since I care most about helping people connect with Jesus, what Ash and I have found is when you have a warm connection with someone using these questions, when it's your turn to share your life, evangelism never feels like a sales pitch or an awkward pivot in the conversation because you already have a warm connection.
I love this. I love this. It really is and boils down to how can we love our neighbor well and be interested in them and their lives. I love this, Heather. Thank you so much, and more when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. We are talking about the 6 conversations, and we have just run through all 6 of them: spiritual, emotional, physical, cognitive, volitional, and spiritual. That's hard to say. And we have a caller on the line, and I want to kick it to him. Don from Lafayette, Indiana. What's your question?
Yeah, I just had a question. First, the main one I wanted to ask is, what's the name of the book so I can get it? And because I've been in hospitality for, probably 15 years, 16. I've been 9.5 now with Chick-fil-A, and I only deal with the folks out front. Just the hospitality in the dining room and training other people how to deal with people, how to love them. And I just want to say, hey, these are awesome categories, and how I just see them happen all the time, every day. So, hey, I just wanted to say this is really good.
Oh, that's so great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I thought, have you got any questions you thought, this is what they should ask? In any of these 6 categories, what would you say would be, or maybe you've experienced somewhere in a hospitality situation that you really appreciated them asking you?
Oh, I love that question. I love that question. In fact, Ash and I have done some corporate training for this very reason. Like, how do you engage with a customer at, when you're in a cashier situation or in the Chick-fil-A line? I love it when people ask me, what's going well today? Like, what's good today? Because you only have about 2 minutes probably with that person who's taking your order. So I love it when people are like, what's good today? What's hard about your week? Just anything that gets into that emotional category. Or if someone just asks me about my order in hospitality, like if someone says, good choice, why did you decide to do, by the way, I know there's a new key lime something shake at Chick-fil-A, something delicious. How'd you decide to get this? Tell me the story. And then you can be like, yeah, actually, I grew up in part of the world where key lime pie was my favorite flavor. You never know. You can ask a good question in a really short interaction. The research shows you don't need a long time to have a warm connection with someone. And then remember that customer. So next time they come through your line, you could say, hey, is it a better week? I know you had that huge, medical exam you were worried about. How'd it go? If you remember what people say in those short interactions, you're going to even have a better connection next time.
Don, thank you for your call. Stay on the line. We would love to give you a copy of the 6 conversations written by Heather Holleman. So stay on the line and we will get that to you. And, that's such a good question, because it is people in hospitality, they are constantly meeting people. What an
Yes.
opportunity they have to really engage and show love and warmth. And because I do think that you never know what you're going to get when you have someone come up to your counter or you're serving someone at a restaurant. But to be able to have, I know even in my own experience, whenever I have a warm experience, you think, wow, I just want to care for that person too. It's a sweet opportunity to really engage and show the love of Christ, especially for those who are in Christ.
I love that. And we're learning that every conversation is a sacred interaction. And you
Yeah.
actually don't know if God is sending you to someone to bless
Yeah.
or if someone's being sent to you to bless you. You never know. It's an adventure.
It is an adventure. And I think, and one of the things that I want to think, I'll say that, is assume that I'm always being sent, that I'm always,
Yes.
that every interaction is an interaction with someone made in the image of God, and it matters, and
It
they
matters.
matter,
Yes. I
and
love
how we
that.
communicate matters. And so I do wonder, as I was looking at the 6 ways someone is made, what do you think of those 6 are the hardest ways to connect with people?
The emotional category. And this is very nerdy. This comes from my love of neuroscience. When you ask someone, how are you feeling, or something like that, it's too stressful for the brain. Put a strong verb in there. Like, instead of how was your trip, say what surprised you, what challenged you, what delighted you, because they need a verb that the brain can picture. It activates what's called mirror neurons. Those of you listening, this is the best tip. Use strong verbs in your questions. People will be able to answer them.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
from your writing professor, from your Penn State writing professor, use strong verbs.
Use strong verbs. Give us an example.
So when I come home, Ash doesn't say, how was your day? That's the weak verb was. He'll put a strong verb in there. He'll say, Heather, what delighted you about class today? And then I picture myself being delighted by my one student. And I'll say, I got to tell you about this one student. Young people, that verb stresses them out. It's existential. It's putting too much pressure on them. Don't say, how was lunch? Say, hey, what food made you most excited? Give them something to picture, and conversations will go better when you put a strong verb in there.
I love that. I love that. Well, we've got the music playing in the background, but we are not going to break. So just keep on talking.
Yes. Yes. I love just giving people good questions that they can remember so they never kind of get stuck again. So when I see a young person, like my neighbors are 3rd and 6th grade, young people love talking about their friends. They also love talking about physical things like, did you change anything about your bedroom, or compliment people? And this is what you say: I love your hair today. How did you get it that way? They will tell you about hair products, about the special braids their mom put in their hair. That is a great question to give a compliment and then say, how did you get it that way? With people in college, the volitional category is gold. So with my students, I'll say, I noticed I love your Nike shoes. How did you decide to buy those instead of the Hokas or the On Clouds? Because it's all about the brands. They will go on and on about their decision. So I love to give a compliment and then ask a decision question. So a girl had a really cute jean jacket on, and I said, I love that. How did you decide to go with that brand? There's a story. They're going to talk, and you notice what they talk about. If they're telling you all about their friends who were with them when they bought that jean jacket, these are people that probably like to talk about the social category. Don't forget about pets.
Yes.
People love to talk about them. Like, hey, what's your dog doing? Like, even with highly academic people, if I can ask them about their animals, they will go on and on. Last night I was at an event and everyone at the table wanted to talk about how hard it is to care for aging cats. We were laughing so hard about cats, and it was just
imagine.
Great time of connection. So yeah.
Cats are hilarious. Yeah.
Yes. Do you sound to me like a great conversationalist, Trillia? Do you have a personal question that you actually love to ask people? Mine is, I love the social question. Like, hey, tell me about your friends. Who have you been spending time with? Do you have one that you love? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you're so good at this.
Oh,
do you
you're
have
so
a
kind.
question? I mean, do you have a question you love to start with when you're connecting with people?
I don't know if I have a question that I love to start with, but I think one of the things that someone told me once was make sure when you walk in the room, other people are the most important people in the room.
Yes.
So I think if I can think, and I say that not as someone who's mastered it, as someone who it's hard. I can think about myself too much. So Tim Keller's book, The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness, is a helpful little pamphlet that I encourage people to read because it helps you to take your focus off yourself so that you can be interested in other people. And so I don't know if I have this is the thing that I do every time, but if I'm looking at that person and
Yes.
what I will say is that I have a hard time with small talk. I'm not very good at
Yes. Well, that's what I love. I mean, that's the same. That's what I love. But that's why these questions matter so much because you can get really deep really quickly. Like the other day, I just asked someone, it was a Saturday, and I was like, do you have any Saturday rituals, like stuff that you always do on Saturday? And I learned about this morning coffee routine. And I was like, hey, how'd you get into that? Like, tell me how you decided to start that. And before you know it, we're in this really deep conversation about like family traditions and where you get your coffee from and what the kind of devotional rituals you have in the morning. Because small talk, you can have a warm connection, but you're like me. I like to go deep.
Well, we have not a lot of time left. So if you can answer this in like 20 seconds. Florence is calling from Illinois. Her daughter is curious and emotional and is going to law school. Mom wants to know how she'll survive in an atmosphere where people's mindset are different.
Great question. The number one advice, the best advice I can give to your daughter is to stay in the realm of storytelling. So when you meet someone who believes something differently from you, to say different political party, different social issues, instead of arguing, say, hey, I can tell you care really passionately about that position. I'd love to know the story of when you first started believing that. And then you'll be in the realm. Yeah, you'll be in the realm of narrative and not in the realm of argument. This has saved me as a professor at Penn State because I'm constantly, just tell me the story about why you believe that.
Tell them the story. I'd like to thank my guest, Heather Holleman, for joining me today. And thanks to the behind-the-scenes team at Moody Radio, my producer, Karen Hendren, my engineer, Meryl St. James. To hear today's program again, you'll find it at livingbyfaithradio.org. Living by Faith is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Bible Institute.